The night Naomi Kingsley's Mercedes spun off that rain-slicked highway, she thought the biggest danger was the smoke rising from her engine. But she was wrong. The real threat came in the form of Luke Harris, a grease-stained mechanic whose gentle hands would save her life, and whose broken heart would nearly destroy everything she'd ever known. What Naomi didn't realize, as Luke cut through her seatbelt, was that her family's billion-dollar empire was already plotting to demolish his world brick by brick. And when the truth finally exploded between them, this heiress would have to choose her legacy of lies or a love that could cost her everything. But some secrets run deeper than either of them imagined, and the real betrayal was only just beginning. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this tale of forbidden love and family deception will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about second chances. The rain hit Naomi's windshield like tiny fists. Each drop caught the glow from her dashboard, making the world outside look like it was covered in diamonds. But pretty didn't make it safe. She should have called Maya to pick her up from the charity dinner, should have taken the town car like her father always insisted. But sometimes a girl just wanted to drive herself home without someone watching her every move. The digital clock on her Mercedes read 10:12 p.m. Naomi rubbed her eyes, feeling the weight of another long day pressing down on her shoulders. 3 board meetings, 2 conference calls, 1 very boring dinner where rich people talked about helping poor people while eating $100 steaks. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, a text from Maya, "Get home safe. Tomorrow's schedule moved to 9 a.m. Naomi sighed. Tomorrow would be just like today, and the day after that. Sometimes she wondered if this was all there was, meetings and smiles and making sure the family name stayed perfect. The highway curved ahead, and she took the exit toward her downtown penthouse. The ramp was slick with rain. Her tires hummed against the wet pavement. That's when everything went wrong. The car hit a patch of water and suddenly felt like it was floating. The steering wheel spun in her hands like it had a mind of its own. The world outside her windows started spinning too. Headlights, trees, guardrail, headlights again. No, 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 she whispered, fighting to control the car. But physics didn't care about her plans. The Mercedes slid sideways, then backwards, then sideways again. The guardrail rushed up to meet her. Metal scraped against metal in a sound that made her teeth hurt. Then she was tumbling down a grassy slope, and the airbag exploded in her face like a punch. When the car finally stopped moving, Naomi sat there for a moment, blinking. Her ears were ringing. Something smelled like burning. The windshield was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and smoke drifted up from under the hood. She tried to move, but the seatbelt held her tight. Her hands shook as she reached for the buckle. It wouldn't come loose. Click, 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 nothing. That's when the fear really hit her. The smoke was getting thicker. What if the car caught fire? What if no one saw her go off the road? It was past 10 at night, and this wasn't exactly a busy exit. Her phone had fallen somewhere she couldn't reach it. The window was cracked but not broken. She was trapped. "Help!" she called out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Somebody help me!" That's when she saw the headlights. A pickup truck slowed down on the road above. For a second, she thought it might just drive by. People didn't stop for strangers much anymore, especially at night, especially not for a fancy car that might mean trouble. But the truck pulled over. A door slammed. Footsteps crunched on gravel. A beam of light swept down the slope toward her. A man's voice called out, calm and steady. "Hey there, you okay?" "I'm stuck," she called back, surprised by how small her voice sounded. "My seatbelt won't come off." "All right, I'm coming down. Just stay still." The light bounced closer. Through the cracked windshield, she could see a man in work clothes sliding carefully down the wet grass. He moved like someone who was used to solving problems with his hands. When he reached her window, he tapped gently on the glass. "I'm Luke. Can you roll this down?" She found the button and pressed it. The window hummed down halfway before stopping, probably damaged in the crash. Luke crouched next to her door. In the glow from his flashlight, she could see a face that looked honest. Strong jaw, kind eyes, hair that needed cutting, maybe 30 years old. Definitely someone who worked for a living. "Okay, Naomi, I saw your name on your purse there. I need you to stay calm while I help you out. Can you move your arms and legs?" She wiggled her fingers and toes. Everything worked. Yeah, I think so. Good. That's real good. Now, this seatbelt's jammed up tight. I'm gonna have to cut it with my knife. You trust me to do that? Trust a stranger with a knife? Under normal circumstances, the answer would be absolutely not. But these weren't normal circumstances, and something about his voice made her believe he wasn't going to hurt her. Yes, she said. Luke pulled a folding knife from his pocket, the kind working men carried for opening boxes and cutting rope. Nothing scary about it. He slipped it carefully under the seatbelt where it crossed her shoulder. This might jerk a little when it gives way, he warned. Ready? She nodded. The knife sliced through the belt in one quick motion. Suddenly she could breathe fully again. Luke reached across her to unlock the door from the inside. Can you swing your legs out? Naomi turned in her seat and put her feet on the wet grass. Luke offered his hand to help her stand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and steady. When she was upright, the world swayed a little. Easy there, Luke said, keeping hold of her arm. Just take a second. That's when she noticed she was shivering. Not from cold. It was a warm September night. From shock, probably. Luke must have noticed too, because he shrugged out of his jacket. Here, he said, draping it around her shoulders. This'll help. The jacket smelled like motor oil and honest work. It was the most comforting thing she'd felt in years. I need to call 911, Luke said, pulling out his phone. Get you checked out. Make sure you're really okay. While he talked to the emergency operator, Naomi looked up the slope at her car. The front end was crumpled against a tree. Steam rose from under the hood. If Luke hadn't stopped. They'll be here in about 10 minutes, he said, hanging up. How you feeling? Dizzy? Sick to your stomach? A little dizzy, she admitted, but mostly just scared. That's normal. Adrenaline's a hell of a thing. Luke guided her to sit on a large rock that wasn't too muddy. What were you doing driving yourself on a night like this? Seems like someone like you would have a driver. Someone like her. He'd noticed her expensive clothes, her jewelry, her car. Of course he had. Everyone always did. Sometimes I just want to be normal, she said softly. Luke studied her face in the flashlight beam. Normal's overrated. You ask me, being alive is better than being normal. That made her smile a little. Is that your life philosophy? One of them. Along with fix what's broken and help when you can. The sound of sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees as the ambulance came down the exit ramp. What's your last name, Luke? Naomi asked. I want to thank you properly. Just Luke's fine, he said, standing as the paramedics approached. And you don't owe me anything. This is what people do. But Naomi knew that wasn't true. Most people would have driven right by. Most people wouldn't have climbed down a muddy slope to help a stranger. Most people wouldn't have given their jacket to someone they'd never see again. The paramedics took over then, asking questions and shining lights in her eyes. Luke stepped back to give them room, but he didn't leave. Even when the police arrived and asked him questions, even when they loaded her onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, she heard one of the paramedics talking to Luke. Good thing you stopped when you did, the man said. Another 10 minutes and that smoke inhalation could have been a real problem. Luke had saved her life. This stranger in work clothes had saved her actual life. From the back of the ambulance, she watched him walk back to his truck. Just before the doors closed, she called out. Luke! He turned around. What's your phone number? I want to... But he was already waving and climbing into his truck. The ambulance doors shut, and the world went quiet except for the hum of the engine and the soft beeping of medical equipment. Naomi lay back on the stretcher, still wrapped in Luke's jacket. She closed her eyes and tried to remember everything about his face. Something told her she was going to want to remember. The emergency room at Mercy General smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Naomi sat on the edge of an exam table while Dr. Martinez checked her pupils with a tiny flashlight. Mild concussion, the doctor said, making notes on her chart. Some bruising from the seatbelt, but overall, you're very lucky. Lucky, that was one word for it. Can I go home tonight? Naomi asked. As long as someone drives you. No operating vehicles for at least 24 hours with a head injury. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Kingsley? We need you to sign some forms. Naomi's heart skipped. She'd given them her name as Naomi K. to avoid attention. The last thing she needed was for word to get out that Charles Kingsley's daughter had wrecked her car. The family business didn't need that kind of publicity. "I'll be right there," she said. As the nurse walked away, Naomi caught a glimpse of someone familiar in the hallway. Luke. He was talking to another nurse, signing something on a clipboard. "Excuse me," Naomi called to Dr. Martinez. "The man who helped me? Is he still here?" "The Good Samaritan? Yes, he wanted to make sure you were all right before he left. Hospital policy. We keep witnesses around until we're sure the patient is stable." Naomi slipped down from the exam table. Her legs felt wobbly, but she could walk. She made her way to the door and peeked out. Luke was just finishing with the paperwork. He looked tired. His shirt was muddy from sliding down the slope to reach her car. His hair was damp from the rain. The nurse handed him a copy of whatever he'd signed. As she did, Naomi saw her own last name printed on the top of the form. Kingsley. Luke's eyes widened slightly as he read it. He glanced up and saw Naomi watching from her doorway. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Luke folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He walked over to her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better, thanks to you." She paused. "You know who I am now." "I know you're the woman who could have died tonight if she hadn't been wearing her seatbelt," Luke said simply. "The rest doesn't matter much to me." But Naomi could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Knowledge, understanding of just how different their worlds were. "Can I have your phone number?" she asked again. "I really do want to thank you." Luke shook his head. "No thanks needed. I'm just glad you're okay. But take care of yourself, Naomi Kingsley," he said gently. "Get that head looked at in a couple days if you're still feeling dizzy." He started to walk away. "Wait," she called after him. "Your jacket." Luke turned back. "Keep it. Someone told me it smells like motor oil anyway." That made her smile. "It does, but I like it." "Good. Maybe it'll remind you to take better care of yourself." And then he was gone, walking through the automatic doors and into the rain. Naomi stood in the hospital hallway, clutching his jacket around her shoulders, watching his taillights disappear into the night. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty air. Naomi's penthouse apartment sat on the 20th floor of the nicest building in downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave her a view of the whole city. On clear days, she could see the mountains. Tonight, all she could see was rain. It was almost 1 a.m. when Maya's key turned in the lock. Naomi's cousin and assistant had her own key for emergencies. This probably qualified. "Oh my God," Maya said, rushing over to where Naomi sat on the couch. "I got your text. Are you really okay? What happened?" Maya Brooks was 3 months younger than Naomi and had been her best friend since they were kids. When Naomi graduated from college and joined the family business, Maya had come with her as personal assistant. Officially, she handled Naomi's schedule and travel arrangements. Unofficially, she was the only person in the world who could tell Naomi when she was being ridiculous. "I'm fine," Naomi said, "just a little shaken up." Maya sat down next to her and immediately noticed the jacket. "Whose is this?" "The man who pulled me out of the car. His name is Luke." "Luke what?" "Just Luke. He wouldn't tell me his last name." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious?" "Not mysterious. Private. There's a difference." "What did he look like?" Naomi closed her eyes, bringing back the image of Luke's face in the flashlight beam. Tall, brown hair that needs cutting, honest eyes, hands that look like they work for a living. "Cute?" Naomi opened her eyes and gave Maya a look. "I was in a car accident, Maya. I wasn't shopping for a boyfriend." "That's not what I asked," Naomi sighed. "Yes, he was cute, in a real person kind of way. As opposed to the fake person kind of way that usually asks you out." That hit too close to home. Naomi's dating life consisted mostly of men her father introduced her to. Business associates' sons, politicians' sons, rich men who wanted richer wives. None of them had ever climbed down a muddy slope to save her life. "He refused money," Naomi said quietly. "What?" "I offered to pay him for helping me. He said no." Maya stared at her. "He turned down money from a Kingsley?" "He didn't know I was a Kingsley when he helped me. And when he found out..." Naomi shook her head. "It didn't seem to matter to him." "Wow, that's either really refreshing or really suspicious." "Refreshing," Naomi said firmly. "Definitely refreshing." Maya was quiet for a moment, studying her cousin's face. "You like him?" "I don't even know him." "That's not what I said." Naomi pulled Luke's jacket tighter around her shoulders. It still smelled like motor oil and rain. "What does it matter? I'll probably never see him again." You could find him. Luke, who drives a pickup and has honest eyes, in a city this size. I could have him tracked down by tomorrow afternoon. No. The word came out sharper than Naomi intended. If he wanted me to find him, he would have given me his number. But no, Maya, he saved my life because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted something from me. I'm not going to ruin that by stalking him. Maya nodded slowly. She understood. After growing up as a Kingsley, Naomi could count on one hand the number of people who had ever helped her without wanting something in return. What are you going to do with the jacket? Naomi looked down at the worn cotton fabric. It was probably 10 years old, clean, but faded from many washings. The kind of thing a working man wore because he needed it, not because it looked good. Keep it, she said. He told me to. As a memento? As a reminder. Of what? Naomi thought about Luke's calm voice in the rain, his steady hands cutting her seatbelt, the way he'd looked at her like she was just a person who needed help, not a name on a billboard or a board meeting agenda. That there are still good people in the world, she said. Saturday morning came with sunshine and a headache that felt like someone was using her skull as a drum. Naomi shuffled to the kitchen in her pajamas and found Maya already there, setting up a breakfast tray. Ginger tea for the headache, Maya said, not looking up from slicing fresh fruit. Scrambled eggs for the protein, toast because you haven't eaten real food in 18 hours. You don't have to take care of me, Naomi protested, even though she was grateful. It's Saturday. You should be home with Derek. Derek's playing golf. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't do something stupid like drive yourself to urgent care. Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from her father. Heard about the accident. Car replacement arranged. Board meeting Monday moved to 10 a.m. to give you time to recover. Of course he'd heard. Charles Kingsley heard about everything that might affect his family or his business. Naomi wondered who had called him. The police? The hospital? It didn't matter. What mattered was that he was treating her like she was made of glass again. Dad knows, Naomi said, showing Maya the text. What did you expect? A Kingsley crashes a $80,000 car, people notice. I just wanted one night to process it myself, before it became a family emergency. Maya sat down across from her with her own cup of tea. You know he worries because he loves you. He worries because I'm a reflection of the company. Everything I do affects our image. That's not fair and you know it. Maybe it wasn't, but fair didn't change the fact that Naomi had been trained since childhood to think about how her actions looked to the outside world. What would people say if Charles Kingsley's daughter got arrested? What would the business community think if she dated someone inappropriate? What would the board say if she made a decision based on feelings instead of profit margins? Sometimes the weight of being a Kingsley felt heavier than the airbag that had knocked the wind out of her. I want to find Luke, Naomi said suddenly. Maya nearly choked on her tea. I thought you said not to track him down, just to see if he's okay. He got rained on and muddy helping me. What if he got sick? What if his truck broke down driving home? Naomi, I know it sounds crazy, but he helped me when he didn't have to. The least I can do is make sure he's all right. Maya set down her cup and gave Naomi the look she'd been giving her since they were 12 years old. The look that meant she was about to say something Naomi didn't want to hear. This isn't about making sure he's okay, Maya said gently. This is about the fact that for 5 minutes Thursday night, someone treated you like a regular person instead of a corporation with legs. Naomi opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because Maya was right. Luke had looked at her and seen someone who needed help, not someone who could help his career or his bank account, just someone who was scared and stuck. When was the last time anyone had seen her that way? Maybe, Naomi admitted. There's nothing wrong with that, Maya said. But if you're going to look for this guy, you need to be honest about why. Naomi picked at her eggs, thinking. What did she want from Luke? A thank you coffee? A chance to get to know the man behind the kind eyes? Or just proof that decent people still existed in her carefully controlled world? I want to return his jacket, she said finally. You could mail it. I want to return it in person. Maya smiled. Now we're getting somewhere. It took Maya exactly 3 hours to find Luke Harris, owner of Harris Auto Repair on Elm Street, about 15 minutes from where Naomi had crashed. 30 years old, unmarried, lived in a small house behind his shop with his 24-year-old sister Rebecca and her 4-year-old son Eli. No criminal record, no outstanding debts, pays his taxes, Maya reported, reading from her laptop. His shop has decent reviews online, seems to specialize in older cars and trucks. Nothing fancy, but honest work. Naomi felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What about his family? Parents died in a car accident when he was 22. He used the insurance money to buy the garage and raise his sister. She's a nurse's aide at the children's hospital. That explained the steady hands and calm voice. Luke Harris was someone who was used to taking care of people. There's something else, Maya said, turning her laptop screen toward Naomi. Look at this. It was a newspaper article from 2 years ago. Local man pulls family from burning apartment building. A picture showed Luke helping an elderly woman down a fire escape while smoke poured from second-story windows. He makes a habit of this, Naomi murmured. Looks like it. You sure you want to complicate this guy's life by bringing a Kingsley into it? Naomi looked at the photo again. Luke's face was streaked with soot, but his expression was focused and calm. The same expression he'd worn while cutting her seatbelt. I just want to say thank you, she said, and return his jacket. Uh-huh. Maya closed the laptop. When? Now. Now? Naomi, it's Saturday afternoon? What if he's busy? What if his family's there? What if I lose my nerve if I wait? Maya studied her cousin's face and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Excitement. Real, honest excitement about something that had nothing to do with board meetings or quarterly reports. All right, Maya said, standing up, but I'm driving. Harris Auto Repair sat on a corner lot in a part of town Naomi rarely visited. The building was old but well-maintained. A hand-painted sign hung over the bay doors, and the small parking lot was clean and organized. Naomi sat in Maya's car for a full 5 minutes, clutching Luke's jacket and trying to work up the courage to get out. You know, Maya said gently, you could still mail it. No, he deserves better than that. Naomi got out of the car and walked toward the open bay doors. The sound of classic rock music drifted out, along with the smell of motor oil and metal. A familiar smell, thanks to the jacket she'd been wearing for 2 days. Inside, she could see Luke bent over the engine of an old Ford pickup. His hair was pulled back with what looked like a rubber band, and his t-shirt had oil stains on it. He was completely focused on whatever he was doing. "Excuse me?" Naomi called out. Luke looked up and his face went through several expressions at once. Surprise, recognition, something that might have been pleasure before he covered it up with polite caution. "Naomi, how are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you." Luke wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked over to where she stood just outside the bay door. Up close, in daylight, she could see that his eyes were green and that he was taller than she'd remembered. "What brings you by?" he asked. Naomi held out his jacket. "I wanted to return this, and to thank you properly." Luke looked at the jacket but didn't take it. "I told you to keep it." "I know, but it belongs to you." "Maybe I don't want it back." That stopped her short. "Why not?" Luke was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Because every time I wear it, I'll wonder if you're taking better care of yourself." The simple honesty of that statement hit Naomi like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had worried about her well-being just because she was a human being worth worrying about? "I am," she said softly. "Taking better care of myself, I mean. No more driving alone in rainstorms." "Good." They stood there looking at each other while classic rock played in the background and afternoon sunlight slanted through the bay doors. Naomi was acutely aware that this man had saved her life 3 days ago, and she knew almost nothing about him except that he fixed cars and helped people and had the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. "Can I buy you coffee?" she asked suddenly. "Or lunch? Or whatever people buy for their heroes?" Luke's mouth quirked up at one corner. "I'm not a hero. I just stopped when I should have stopped." "Most people wouldn't have." "Then most people need to do better." That made her smile. "Is that another one of your life philosophies?" "Working on it." A woman's voice called from inside the garage. "Luke, who's out there?" "Coming, Becca," Luke called back. He looked at Naomi apologetically. "My sister. She's protective." I should go, Naomi said quickly. I don't want to interrupt your work. But before she could leave, a young woman appeared in the doorway. Tall and lean, with Luke's eyes and a no-nonsense expression, she looked Naomi up and down, taking in the expensive clothes and perfect hair. You're the one from the accident, Rebecca Harris said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I'm Naomi, she held out her hand. I wanted to thank your brother. Rebecca shook her hand briefly. He doesn't usually bring his rescue work home. Becca, Luke warned. What? It's true. You pull people out of burning buildings, out of wrecked cars, out of whatever trouble they've gotten into, and then you disappear before they can thank you properly. It's like you're allergic to gratitude. Naomi looked between the siblings, sensing an old argument. Maybe he just doesn't want to complicate people's lives. Maybe, Rebecca agreed. Or maybe he doesn't think he deserves to be thanked. Becca, Luke said again, more firmly this time. But Rebecca was studying Naomi with new interest. You came all the way down here to return a jacket? And to say thank you. Uh-huh. How did you find him? Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. I had someone look him up. I know how that sounds, but sounds like someone who wanted to make sure he was okay, Rebecca interrupted. Sounds like someone who doesn't take kindness for granted. The approval in her voice was unexpected. Naomi had expected to be dismissed as another rich girl playing with the help. Instead, Rebecca seemed genuinely glad she'd come. I should really go, Naomi said, again, suddenly feeling out of place. I just wanted to make sure you were all right, both of you. She started to turn away, still holding the jacket. Keep it, Luke said behind her. Naomi stopped. What? The jacket. Keep it. Like I said before, maybe it'll remind you to be careful. She turned back to face him. Why do you care if I'm careful? Luke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. Because the world's a better place with you in it. The simple truth of that statement hung in the air between them. Naomi felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that had been closed for a very long time. Luke, she said quietly. He waited. Would you like to have coffee sometime? Not as a thank you. Just because. Behind Luke, Rebecca made a small sound that might have been approval. Luke looked at Naomi for a long moment. She could see him thinking, weighing something in his mind. I don't think that's a good idea, he said finally. The words hit her like cold water. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume. It's not that I don't want to, Luke said quickly. It's just that we're from different worlds. You're Charles Kingsley's daughter. I fix cars for a living. People would talk. Let them talk. Easy to say when you're not the one they'll call a gold digger. Naomi stared at him. Is that what you think? That I'm slumming it with the poor mechanic? I think you're a nice woman who's grateful to be alive, and I think gratitude can feel like something bigger than it is. That stung because it might be true. How could she tell the difference between gratitude and genuine interest when she'd only known him for 10 minutes total? Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe I should go. She turned to leave again, and this time Luke didn't stop her, but Rebecca did. You know what I think? The younger woman called out. I think my brother's scared. Becca, don't, Luke warned. Scared that someone might actually see him as worth more than his bank account. Scared that a woman like you might have reasons for liking him that don't have anything to do with charity work. That's enough, Luke said, but Rebecca wasn't done. He's been taking care of everyone else since he was 22 years old. Maybe it's time someone took care of him for a change. Naomi looked back at Luke, whose face had gone carefully blank. She could see the truth in what Rebecca was saying. This was a man who saved people as naturally as breathing. But who saved him? I'm not looking for charity, Naomi said quietly. And I'm not looking to be anyone's charity case. I just thought maybe we could be friends. Friends, Luke repeated like he was testing the word. Friends who have coffee sometimes. Friends who check in on each other. Friends who... She shrugged. I don't know. I've never been friends with someone who pulled me out of a wrecked car. That got a small smile from him. I've never been friends with someone who owns a car worth more than my house. So we'll figure it out together. Luke looked at his sister, who was watching the whole exchange with obvious interest. Then he looked back at Naomi. Coffee, he said finally. Just coffee. Just coffee, Naomi agreed. And you keep the jacket. I keep the jacket. Luke wiped his hands on his shop rag again, even though they were already clean. Tomorrow afternoon, there's a diner called Ruthie's about 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy sounds perfect. They exchanged phone numbers, and Naomi walked back to Maya's car with Luke's jacket folded carefully over her arm and something that felt suspiciously like happiness bubbling up in her chest. "How did it go?" Maya asked as Naomi got into the passenger seat. "We're having coffee tomorrow." "Just coffee?" Naomi looked back at the garage where Luke had returned to work on the Ford pickup. "Just coffee," she said, "for now." As Maya drove them back toward downtown, Naomi pressed her face to the window and watched Luke's neighborhood roll by. Small houses with front porches, kids playing in yards, a corner grocery with handwritten signs in the window. It was a world away from her penthouse and board meetings, a world where people helped each other without expecting anything in return. A world where a man like Luke Harris could save someone's life just because it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in years, Naomi Kingsley wanted to be part of that world. Sunday afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows of Ruthie's diner, making the worn vinyl booths look almost cheerful. Naomi sat in a corner booth, trying not to check her phone every 30 seconds. She'd arrived 10 minutes early because she didn't know what else to do with her nervous energy. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blue sweater. Nothing too fancy, nothing that screamed, "I have more money than sense," just normal clothes for a normal coffee date with a normal guy who happened to have saved her life. The bell above the door chimed, and Luke walked in. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, hair combed, wearing a button-down shirt instead of a t-shirt, but his work boots were the same ones he'd worn to slide down that muddy slope Thursday night. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Becca's car wouldn't start, and I had to give her a jump." "Everything okay?" "Just a dead battery. Nothing dramatic." Luke picked up the menu, even though he probably knew it by heart. "How's your head feeling?" "Better. Almost back to normal." A waitress with graying hair and kind eyes appeared at their table. "What can I get you folks?" "Coffee, please," Naomi said, "and maybe a piece of pie." "Apple or cherry?" "What do you recommend?" The waitress, her name tag read Ruthie, smiled. "Honey, I make both from scratch every morning. Can't go wrong either way." "Apple, then." "Make that too," Luke said. "And coffee for me too, Ruthie." When the waitress left, Naomi looked around the diner. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor tiles, a jukebox in the corner playing something that might have been popular when her father was young. The whole place felt like a time capsule. "Is this your usual spot?" she asked. "Been coming here since I bought the garage. Ruthie feeds half the neighborhood and she doesn't charge extra for advice." "Oh, what kind of advice?" Luke shrugged. "Everything. Business troubles, family problems. Why your truck makes that weird noise when you turn left. Ruthie's got opinions about all of it." Ruthie returned with their coffee and pie. The apple filling was still warm, and the crust looked perfect. Naomi took a bite and made a small sound of appreciation. "Good?" Luke asked. "Amazing. I haven't had homemade pie in years." "Where do you usually eat?" Naomi thought about it. Restaurant meals with business associates, catered events, room service when she was traveling. "I don't cook much," she said finally. "Maya orders in a lot." "Maya?" "My cousin, and my assistant, and my best friend." Naomi took another bite of pie. "She basically runs my life so I don't have to think about details like what to eat for dinner." Luke studied her over his coffee cup. "Sounds convenient." "It is, most of the time. But not always." Naomi set down her fork, thinking. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just decide things for myself. Little things like what to have for breakfast or which route to take to work, without someone asking me if it fits my schedule or matches my image." "Your image?" "Being a Kingsley. Everything I do reflects on the family business, where I eat, who I date, what I wear to the grocery store. It all matters." Luke was quiet for a moment. "Must get tiring." "Sometimes." Naomi looked out the window, watching normal people walk by on the sidewalk. "What about you? Do you ever get tired of taking care of everyone?" "What do you mean?" "Your sister mentioned that you've been looking after people since you were 22. That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young." Luke's face went carefully neutral. Becca talks too much. She loves you. It shows. Yeah, well, family's family. You do what you have to do. Naomi heard something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. Do you ever get to just be Luke? Not Luke the caretaker or Luke the hero or Luke the guy who fixes everything for everyone? I'm not a hero, he said automatically. There's that word again. You really don't like it, do you? Luke took a sip of coffee, buying time. Heroes do extraordinary things. I just do what needs doing. Maybe that's what makes you extraordinary. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Naomi saw a man who had been taking care of other people for so long that he'd forgotten how to let anyone take care of him. Luke saw a woman who had been living up to other people's expectations for so long that she'd forgotten what she actually wanted for herself. Can I ask you something? Naomi said. Sure. Why did you agree to have coffee with me? Really? Luke considered the question seriously. Because when I looked at you Thursday night, you weren't Charles Kingsley's daughter. You were just someone who needed help. And when you came to the garage yesterday, he paused, you were still just someone real. As opposed to what? As opposed to what I expected. Someone playing rich girl dress up with the poor mechanic. That stung a little. And now? Now I think you're someone who makes really good coffee dates. That made her smile. Even though we're from different worlds? Maybe different worlds isn't such a bad thing. Maybe we can show each other things we wouldn't see otherwise. They talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing. Luke told her about learning to run the garage, about the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. Naomi told him about board meetings and charity dinners, about the weight of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. She learned that Luke had wanted to be a teacher before his parents died, that he still read everything he could get his hands on, history, science, novels, whatever the library had, that he coached Little League on Saturday mornings because he liked kids and believed everyone deserved someone cheering them on. He learned that Naomi had majored in art history before being pulled into the family business, that she still painted sometimes, late at night when no one was watching, that she'd never been in love, not really, because she'd never met anyone who saw her as more than a stepping stone to something bigger. When they finally left the diner, the sun was starting to set. They stood on the sidewalk outside, neither quite ready to say goodbye. This was nice, Naomi said. It was. Can we do it again sometime? Luke looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure you want to? This isn't going to get simpler, Naomi. If anything, it's going to get more complicated. I know, but maybe some things are worth a little complication. Luke smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd seen from him. Maybe they are. The next week fell into a pattern that felt almost normal. Naomi would text Luke in the mornings, usually something simple like, "Hope your day goes well." He would text back in the evenings, often something funny that had happened at the garage. On Wednesday, she stopped by with lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches from the deli down the main street from her office. Luke was working on an old Chevy pickup, and she sat on an overturned crate watching him work while they ate. You know what you're doing, she observed. 16 years of practice. Luke wiped his hands on a shop rag. This old truck's been coming here since I was in high school. Owner's 83 years old, refuses to buy anything newer because they don't make them like this anymore. Do they? Make them like this anymore? Not really. Everything's computerized now. You can't fix a modern car with a socket wrench and some elbow grease. You need special tools, diagnostic computers, parts that cost more than this truck is worth. There was something wistful in his voice. You miss the old days? Sometimes. There was something pure about it, you know? Something breaks, you fix it, problem solved. Naomi understood that feeling. In her world, nothing was ever that simple. Every problem had 10 different solutions, each with its own set of consequences and complications. What's the most satisfying thing you've ever fixed? She asked. Luke thought about it while he gathered up their sandwich wrappers. About 3 years ago, this woman brought in her dad's 1967 Mustang. Classic car, but it hadn't run in 15 years. She wanted to surprise him for his 70th birthday. Did you get it running? Took me 2 months. Had to track down parts from junkyards all over the state. But when we fired it up, Luke's face lit up with the memory. The sound that engine made, Perfect. And when she surprised her dad with it, he cried. Actually cried. That must have felt amazing. Better than amazing. That's what I'm talking about. Something was broken, and I made it whole again. Made someone happy. He shrugged. That's what matters. Naomi felt something twist in her chest. When was the last time she'd done something that made someone truly happy? Not impressed or satisfied or professionally pleased. Actually happy. I should probably get back, she said, checking her phone. I have a conference call at 3. Of course. Luke stood up and walked her to her car. Thanks for lunch. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He opened her car door for her, and for a moment they stood close together. Close enough that she could smell motor oil and soap on his skin. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Naomi, he said quietly. Yeah? Be careful driving back, okay? No more rainy highway adventures. I promise. But as she drove away, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that she was already in the middle of an adventure, one that had nothing to do with rain or highways and everything to do with the way Luke Harris made her feel like herself for the first time in years. Thursday night, Naomi's father invited her to dinner at his house. Not unusual. They had dinner together once a week, usually to discuss business or family matters. What was unusual was the way Charles Kingsley kept glancing at her over his wine glass, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You seem different lately, he said finally, cutting into his salmon. Different how? Lighter. Less. He paused, searching for the right word. Less burdened. Naomi nearly choked on her wine. Burdened? You know what I mean. The weight of responsibility. The family business. It's a lot for someone your age to carry. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever heard from her father. Charles Kingsley didn't apologize. He just adjusted course and moved forward. I'm fine, Dad. I know you are. You're stronger than your mother was. He said it matter-of-factly, but Naomi heard the pain underneath. Her mother had died when Naomi was 16, worn down by years of living up to the Kingsley name. I just want you to be happy. I am happy. Are you? Or are you just good at pretending to be happy? The question caught her off guard. Her father wasn't usually given to philosophical conversations about emotional well-being. I'm figuring it out, she said honestly. Charles nodded and changed the subject to quarterly reports and board meeting agendas. But Naomi could feel him watching her throughout the rest of dinner, trying to figure out what had changed. If only he knew that what had changed was a man in work boots who thought homemade pie was a perfectly good dinner, and who looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. Friday afternoon, Luke called instead of texting. Hey, he said when she answered. You busy tonight? Nothing I can't reschedule. Why? Becca's working late and Eli's staying with me. I was thinking of taking him to the park, maybe getting some ice cream after. Thought you might want to come along. Naomi felt a flutter of nervousness. Meeting his nephew meant something, didn't it? It meant Luke was starting to think of her as more than just someone he'd had a few coffee dates with. I'd love to, she said. What time? 6? I can pick you up, or we can meet there. I'll meet you where? Luke gave her directions to Riverside Park, about 10 minutes from his garage. After he hung up, Naomi sat in her office chair, staring at her phone. She was going to spend Friday night at a playground with a 4-year-old. When was the last time she'd done anything that normal? Never. The answer was never. At 6 o'clock, Naomi pulled into the parking lot at Riverside Park. She spotted Luke immediately, pushing a small boy on a swing set. The child was laughing, head thrown back with pure joy, while Luke grinned and called out encouragement. Watching them together, Naomi felt something she couldn't quite name. Longing, maybe, or recognition of something she'd never had but had always wanted. Higher, Uncle Luke, higher. Any higher and you'll fly to the moon, kiddo. Eli spotted Naomi, approaching and demanded to be let down from the swing. He was small for 4, with Luke's eyes and a gap-toothed smile that was utterly charming. Are you Naomi? He asked, looking up at her with frank curiosity. I am. You must be Eli. Uncle Luke said you got stuck in your car and he had to cut you out with his knife. That's right. Your uncle saved my life. Eli nodded seriously. He saves lots of people. Mama says he's a hero, but he doesn't like it when she says that. Luke's cheeks went slightly red. Eli, why don't you show Naomi the monkey bars? For the next hour, Naomi found herself doing things she'd never done before. She climbed on playground equipment in her good shoes. She pushed a 4-year-old on the merry-go-round until she was dizzy. She helped Eli across the monkey bars, catching him when his little hands couldn't hold on anymore. And she laughed. Really laughed, not the careful, measured laughter she used at business dinners and charity events. This was the kind of laughter that came from watching a small boy try to slide down the slide backwards, or seeing Luke get stuck trying to follow his nephew through a tunnel meant for much smaller people. "Ice cream time," Luke announced when the playground started to empty as other families headed home. They walked to a small ice cream stand near the park entrance. Eli ordered a cone with 3 scoops of different flavors, which immediately began melting faster than he could eat it. Naomi and Luke shared napkin duty, cleaning sticky fingers and face, while Eli chattered about everything he saw. "My teacher says penguins can't fly, but they can swim really fast," Eli informed them, vanilla ice cream smeared across his chin. "Do you think that's fair?" "What do you mean?" Naomi asked. "Well, birds are supposed to fly, right? So why do penguins just swim? It seems like they got the wrong job." Luke and Naomi exchanged amused glances over the boy's head. "Maybe they like swimming better than flying," Naomi suggested. "Maybe they chose the job they wanted instead of the job they were supposed to have." Eli considered this seriously. "That makes sense. I want to drive race cars when I grow up, even though Mama says I should be a doctor or a teacher." "What does Uncle Luke say?" "He says I should be whatever makes me happy, as long as I work hard and don't hurt anybody." Naomi looked at Luke, who was carefully wiping ice cream off Eli's hands. There it was again. That natural kindness, that instinct to take care of people. But also something else, the belief that people should get to choose their own paths, even when those paths didn't make practical sense. "That sounds like good advice," Naomi said. "Uncle Luke gives good advice, except about girls. Mama says he's terrible at girl advice." "Eli," Luke warned, but he was smiling. "What?" "It's true. Mama says you haven't had a girlfriend in forever because you're too busy fixing everyone else's problems to notice when someone likes you." Naomi felt her cheeks get warm. Is that so?" "Yep. But I think you like him. You smile a lot when you look at him." Out of the mouths of babes, Naomi did like Luke. More than liked him, if she was being honest. And sitting here in the growing darkness, watching him be patient and kind with a 4-year-old, she was starting to understand why. Luke Harris was the most genuinely good person she'd ever met. Not good because it benefited him, or because it looked right, or because it was expected. Good because that's who he was at his core. "I do like your uncle," Naomi said quietly. "He's a very special person." "I know," Eli said matter-of-factly. "That's why Mama worries about him. She says good people sometimes get hurt by people who aren't as good." The simple truth of that statement hit Naomi like a physical blow. Is that what she was? Someone who wasn't as good? Someone who might hurt Luke without meaning to? "Okay, kiddo," Luke said, clearly sensing the shift in mood. "Time to head home. You've got preschool tomorrow." They walked back to the parking lot together, Eli between them, holding both their hands. It felt like playing house, except the feelings it stirred up in Naomi weren't make-believe at all. "Thank you for letting me come," she said when they reached her car. "Thank you for coming. Eli likes you." "I like him too. He's amazing, Luke. You're doing something really right with him." Luke looked down at his nephew, who was trying to catch fireflies in the growing darkness. "I just try to show him that the world's not all bad, that there are people worth trusting." "Is that what your parents showed you?" "They tried to. Before," he shrugged. "Eli deserves better than what Becca and I got. He deserves to believe in good things." Naomi's heart ached for the boy Luke had been, suddenly responsible for his teenage sister and a future he'd never planned. And it ached for the man he'd become, so focused on protecting everyone else that he'd forgotten to protect his own heart. "Luke," she said softly. "Yeah?" "You deserve to believe in good things, too." He looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Sometimes I think I'm starting to." Saturday morning brought the phone call that changed everything. Naomi was in her kitchen, making actual breakfast instead of grabbing a protein bar on her way to the office, when Maya burst through the door with a stack of papers in her hand. "We have a problem," Maya announced. "Good morning to you too," Naomi said, flipping her eggs. "Want some breakfast?" "I'm serious, Naomi. Look at this." Maya spread the papers across the kitchen island. Legal documents, property surveys, business correspondence, all with the Kingsley Auto Group letterhead. "What is this?" "It's the Arden Holdings acquisition your father mentioned. Last week. The one you said you weren't really involved in?" Naomi set down her spatula and picked up one of the documents. Arden Holdings was acquiring a full city block for redevelopment, mixed-use residential and commercial space, very profitable, very normal for a company like theirs. "I still don't see the problem," Naomi said, scanning the property list. "Look at the addresses." Naomi read through the list more carefully. 1247 Elm Street, 1251 Elm Street, 1255 Elm Street. Her blood went cold. "Maya, what's the address of Luke's garage?" 1249 Elm Street. Right in the middle of the block, Kingsley Auto Group was buying up for demolition. Naomi sank onto a kitchen stool, the papers suddenly feeling heavy in her hands. "When?" "The acquisition closes in 6 weeks. Tenants have 60 days after that to vacate. So Luke has about 3 months before he loses his shop. Unless he owns the building." Naomi already knew the answer, but she asked anyway. "Does he own it?" Maya pulled out another document. "He rents, month-to-month lease, has for 8 years. Naomi stared at the papers, feeling sick. Luke's garage, his livelihood, the business he'd built from nothing, the place where he fixed broken things and made people happy. Gone, so her family's company could build another shopping center. "There has to be something we can do," Naomi said. "Some way to exclude his property from the deal." "Maybe, but you'd have to talk to your father, and you'd have to tell him why it matters to you." Which meant telling her father about Luke, about the coffee dates and the playground visits and the way her heart sped up every time he smiled, about the fact that she was falling for a man whose life her family was about to destroy. "He doesn't know," Naomi said quietly. "About the acquisition? About any of it. Luke doesn't know that I'm involved with the company buying his building. He doesn't know that I could probably stop this with one conversation." Maya was quiet for a moment, studying her cousin's face. What are you going to do?" Naomi looked at the papers again, at Luke's address typed in black and white next to words like demolition and redevelopment and vacate premises. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know." But even as she said it, Naomi knew she was lying. She knew exactly what she was going to do, and it was the thing that terrified her most. She was going to have to tell Luke the truth, all of it. And then she was going to have to pray that the man who believed in good things would still believe in her. Naomi spent the rest of Saturday pacing her penthouse like a caged animal. Every time she picked up her phone to call Luke, she set it down again. How do you tell someone that your family is about to destroy their livelihood? How do you explain that you've been keeping secrets without sounding like every other rich person who thinks money can fix anything? By Sunday evening, she still hadn't figured it out. But she couldn't wait any longer. Luke deserved to know what was coming, even if it meant losing him forever. She drove to his garage after hours, knowing he often worked late on weekends. The bay doors were open, and she could see him underneath an old Honda, nothing visible except his legs sticking out from under the car. "Luke," she called out. The creeper rolled out, and Luke sat up, wiping grease from his hands. He smiled when he saw her, and the sight of that trusting, happy expression made her stomach twist. "Hey, what brings you by?" "We need to talk." Something in her voice made his smile fade. He stood up, tossing the rag onto his workbench. "That sounds serious." "It is." Luke gestured toward his small office in the back of the garage. 2 mismatched chairs, a desk covered with invoices and parts catalogs, a coffee maker that had seen better days. On the wall hung a photo of him and Becca at his high school graduation, both of them grinning at the camera. "Want some coffee?" he asked, but Naomi shook her head. "Luke, I need to tell you something about my family's company." "Okay," she took a deep breath. "We're buying this block, the whole block, for redevelopment." The words hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Luke stared at her, his face going through several expressions before settling on something that looked like resignation. "When?" he asked quietly. "The deal closes in 6 weeks. After that, tenants have 60 days to vacate." Luke sat down heavily in his desk chair. running his hands through his hair. 3 months. I didn't know until yesterday morning. Maya found the paperwork, and how long have you known it was a possibility? Naomi's heart sank at the careful way he asked the question, like he was already building walls between them. What do you mean? I mean, your father mentioned a development project the night of your accident, at the hospital. I heard him on the phone with someone. Luke's voice was very calm, very controlled. How long have you known that my garage was in the way of your family's plans? The accusation hit her like a slap. I didn't know. Luke, I swear I didn't know until Maya showed me the papers yesterday. But you knew there was a project. You knew your family was buying property in this area. Naomi wanted to lie, wanted to make it simpler than it was, but Luke deserved better than that. Yes, she said quietly. I knew there was a project. I sit on the board. I just didn't know the details until it was too late to matter. It's not too late. I can talk to my father. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe. Luke held up a hand, stopping her. Naomi, stop. The gentleness in his voice was somehow worse than anger would have been. This was the voice he'd used to keep her calm while cutting her seatbelt. The voice he used with Eli when the boy was upset. You think I'm another charity case, Luke said. Another broken thing for you to fix. That's not, isn't it? Poor mechanic about to lose his shop. Rich girl swoops in to save the day. How's that any different from you paying my suppliers behind my back? Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. You know about that? Jorge mentioned it, said a helpful angel covered my overdue balance. Luke's laugh was bitter. I should have put it together then. I was trying to help, without asking me, without telling me, just like you're trying to help now. What's wrong with helping someone you care about? Nothing if you treat them like an equal. Everything if you treat them like a project. The words hit harder than Naomi expected. Is that really what you think? That I see you as a project? Luke was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. I think you see a simple problem with a simple solution. Save the garage, keep the grateful mechanic. Everyone lives happily ever after. That's not how I see it at all. No? Then tell me, Naomi. If you hadn't found out about the development, would you have told me you sit on the board of a company that could buy and sell my entire business without blinking? The question hung between them, and Naomi realized with sinking horror that she didn't have a good answer. She'd been planning to tell him eventually. Maybe. When things were more serious between them, when she was sure he cared about her enough to see past the money and the power and the complications. I was going to tell you, she said weakly. When? I don't know. Soon. Soon. Luke nodded like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. You know what the real problem is here? It's not the money or the business deal or even the garage. What is it then? It's that you don't trust me enough to tell me the truth, and I don't trust myself enough to believe that someone like you could really want someone like me. The honesty of that admission broke something inside Naomi's chest. Luke, I think you should go. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Luke stood up, moving toward the door. You're Charles Kingsley's daughter. You sit on the board of a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I fix cars for a living in a garage I don't even own. None of that matters. It all matters. It matters because you didn't trust me with it. It matters because when this gets complicated, and it will get complicated, you'll have resources I can't even imagine, and I'll have nothing but my pride. Your pride is going to cost you everything, Naomi said, frustration finally overriding her guilt. The garage, your business, maybe even your home. And for what? Because you're too stubborn to let someone help you? My pride is all I have left, Luke said simply. Take that away, and what am I? Just another guy who got lucky enough to catch the attention of a rich girl feeling charitable. The words were like a physical blow. Naomi stared at him, seeing the hurt and fear behind his anger. This wasn't really about the garage or the money. This was about a man who had spent 8 years building something from nothing, only to watch it slip away because of forces completely beyond his control. I should have told you, she said quietly. About the board, about the business deal, about all of it. I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm just another rich person playing games with real people's lives. Luke's expression softened slightly, but he didn't move away from the door. Maybe that's what you are. Maybe it is. Naomi picked up her purse, suddenly feeling exhausted. Or maybe I'm just someone who fell for a man who saves people but won't let anyone save him. She walked past him toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I meant what I said about talking to my father. The offer stands, whether you want anything to do with me or not. Luke didn't answer, and Naomi didn't look back as she walked to her car, but she could feel him watching her go, and she could feel something precious breaking between them with every step. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of their conversation. Luke's face when she told him about the development, the careful way he'd asked his questions like he was afraid of the answers, the resignation in his voice when he told her to leave. Monday morning brought no relief. She sat through board meetings and conference calls, but her mind was miles away, at a garage on Elm Street where a good man was probably wondering how he was going to tell his sister and nephew that they might have to start over somewhere else. At lunch, she drove to Ruthie's diner. She didn't expect to see Luke there, but she needed to be somewhere that reminded her of better times, of apple pie and easy conversation, and the way he'd smiled at her across the table. Ruthie was working the lunch rush alone, moving between tables with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 30 years. When she spotted Naomi sitting in the corner booth, she brought over coffee without being asked. "You look like you lost your best friend," the older woman observed. "Something like that." Ruthie studied her with shrewd eyes. "This have anything to do with Luke Heiress?" Naomi looked up sharply. "You know Luke?" "Honey, I've been feeding that boy since he was 22 years old and didn't know how to boil water. He comes in here when he's upset, orders coffee, and stares at it until it gets cold." "Has he been in lately?" "This morning. Looked about as miserable as you do right now." Ruthie slid into the booth across from her. "You want to tell me, what's going on?" For some reason, sitting in that familiar booth with this kind stranger, Naomi found herself telling the whole story. The accident, the coffee dates, the way Luke made her feel like herself for the first time in years. And then, the development deal, the secrets, the fight that might have destroyed everything. Ruthie listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling Naomi's coffee cup. When the story was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That boy's been hurt before," she said finally. "By who?" "By people who thought they knew what was best for him. Social workers who wanted to split him and his sister up because he was too young to be a guardian. Bank officers who thought a 22-year-old kid had no business trying to run a garage. Customers who figured they could cheat him because he looked too nice to fight back." Naomi felt a stab of guilt. "I'm not trying to cheat him." "No, but you're trying to fix his problems without asking if he wants them fixed. Same thing, different package. So what am I supposed to do? Let him lose everything because he's too proud to accept help? You're supposed to ask him what he wants, not what you think he needs, what he actually wants." "What if what he wants is for me to leave him alone?" Ruthie's expression softened. "Then you respect that." "But honey, I've watched that boy for 8 years. I've seen him happy exactly twice. Once when he got the garage running in the black for the first time. And once last week when he came in here talking about some woman who made him remember what it felt like to just be Luke." "He said that?" "In so many words. Point is, Luke Heiress has spent his whole adult life taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time someone took care of him. But you can't force it. Has to be his choice." Naomi left the diner with Ruthie's words echoing in her head. Ask him what he wants. Such a simple concept, but she realized she'd never actually done it. She'd assumed, she'd planned, she'd tried to fix things. But she'd never just asked Luke what he wanted from her, if anything. Maybe it was time to start. Tuesday morning, Naomi knocked on her father's office door at exactly 8 o'clock. Charles Kingsley was already at his desk, reading reports and making notes in his precise handwriting. "Naomi, you're early. Everything all right? I need to talk to you about the Arden Holdings project." Charles looked up from his papers, giving her his full attention. "What about it?" "I want to exclude one property from the acquisition, 1249 Elm Street." "The auto repair shop? Why?" This was the moment of truth, the moment when she either told her father the whole story or tried to find some business justification for saving Luke's garage. "Because I'm in love with the man who runs it." The words hung in the air between them. Charles set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter's face. "Luke Harris," he said finally. "You know about him?" "I make it my business to know about anyone who becomes important to my family." Charles was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure about this?" "About him?" "As sure as I can be about anything." "That's not an answer." Naomi thought about Luke's hands cutting her seatbelt, his patience with Eli, the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth knowing, not something worth having. "Yes," she said. "I'm sure." Charles nodded slowly. "What kind of man is he?" "The kind who stops to help strangers, the kind who raised his sister from the time she was 16, the kind who coaches Little League on weekends because he thinks kids need someone cheering them on." "And what does he want from you?" "Nothing. That's the problem. He doesn't want anything from me, and I've been trying to give him everything whether he wants it or not." That got a small smile from her father. "Sounds familiar." "What do you mean?" "Your mother used to say the same thing about me, that I was so busy trying to give her the world that I forgot to ask if she wanted it." It was the most personal thing her father had said about her mother in years. Naomi felt her throat tighten. "What happened to the Arden project if we exclude his property?" "We work around it. It'll cost more and take longer, but it can be done." Charles picked up his pen again. "I'll have legal draft a purchase offer for Mr. Harris. Fair market value, no strings attached." "Dad, this is a business decision, Naomi. We're excluding a property from development and offering to sell it to the current tenant. It happens all the time." But Naomi could see the understanding in her father's eyes. This wasn't just business, and they both knew it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to convince him to accept it, and from what I know about Luke Harris, that might be the hardest part of all." Wednesday afternoon, Naomi got the call she'd been dreading. Maya's voice was tight with worry. "You need to get to the garage, now." "What's wrong?" "Luke's not answering his phone, and there are legal documents taped to his front door. I think the property management company is trying to force him out early." Naomi was in her car before Maya finished talking, driving faster than was probably safe through downtown traffic. Her heart pounded as she pulled into the parking lot of Harris Auto Repair. The garage was closed, bay doors down, no lights on inside. But Luke's truck was there, and Maya was right. There were official-looking papers taped to the door. Naomi walked around to the back of the building, where Luke's small house sat behind the garage. The front door was open, and she could hear voices inside. "Don't care what the lease says," a man was saying. "The property's been sold. New owners want everyone out by the end of the month." "The lease says 60 days notice," Luke's voice tight with controlled anger. "We've got rights." "Not anymore, you don't. Check the papers." Naomi knocked on the open door frame. "Luke?" He appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted and frustrated. Behind him, she could see Rebecca holding Eli, both of them looking scared. "What are you doing here?" Luke asked. "Maya called." She said. Naomi broke off, looking past him at the official in the cheap suit who was standing in Luke's living room like he owned the place. "What's going on?" "Property management company," Luke said grimly. "Apparently the sale went through faster than expected. We have 3 weeks to get out." 3 weeks? Naomi felt cold. But the paperwork said, the paperwork lied. The official looked at Naomi with interest. "You a friend of the family?" "Something like that." "Well, you can tell your friends that Green Valley Property Management doesn't mess around. Tenants are out by October 15th, or we call the sheriff." The man pushed past them and walked to his car, leaving Luke and his family standing in their own home like trespassers. "This is wrong," Naomi said when the man was gone. "This has to be illegal." "Legal enough," Rebecca said bitterly. "We called a lawyer this morning. Turns out the lease has a clause that lets the landlord terminate early if the property's sold for redevelopment. But Kingsley Auto Group isn't even taking possession until—" Naomi stopped, realizing what she was about to say. Luke looked at her sharply. "Until when?" "Until the deal closes in 6 weeks. "So who's Green Valley Property Management?" Naomi felt sick as the pieces fell into place. "They're probably a subsidiary, someone my father's company hired to handle the transition." The silence that followed was deafening. Luke stared at her like he'd never seen her before. "Your family's company hired these people," he said slowly. "I didn't know." "Stop," Luke's voice was very quiet, very controlled. Just stop. He walked past her toward the garage, and after a moment, she followed. He stood in the middle of his empty shop, looking around at the tools and equipment he'd spent 8 years accumulating. 3 weeks to pack up my entire life, he said to no one in particular. Luke, I can fix this. I can call my father right now and what? Tell him to call off his dogs, make some phone calls, and magically everything goes back to normal? Yes, exactly. Luke turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something deeper and more final than anger. Do you know what the worst part is? He asked. Naomi shook her head. It's not losing the garage. It's not having to start over somewhere else. It's not even having to tell Eli that we can't stay in the only home he's ever known. What is it? Then? It's that you still don't get it. You're standing here in the middle of the mess your family created, and your first instinct is to fix it for me. Like I'm some kind of charity case who can't handle his own problems. That's not what I think. Isn't it? You've been managing my life since the day we met, paying my bills, solving my problems, making decisions about my future? And now you want to save my garage like it's just another broken thing for rich girl Naomi to fix. The words stung because they had enough truth in them to hurt. Had she been managing his life? Trying to fix things he hadn't asked her to fix? I love you, she said quietly. Luke's face went soft for just a moment, and she saw the man who had given her his jacket and worried about her driving safely. Then the walls went back up. I know you do, he said, but love isn't enough when one person has all the power and the other person has nothing. You're not nothing. In your world I am. I'm the poor mechanic you rescued from his own life, the project that makes you feel good about yourself. That's not true. Prove it. How? Luke looked around his garage one more time, then back at her. Walk away. Don't call your father. Don't fix anything. Don't save anyone. Just walk away and let me handle this myself. Naomi felt like he'd asked her to cut out her own heart. Luke, that's what I thought. He turned toward the office, then stopped. I'll have the rest of your things ready for Maya to pick up tomorrow. The jacket, anything else you left here. I don't want my things back. It doesn't matter what you want anymore. His voice was gentle but final. This is over, Naomi. We're over. She stood there in the empty garage, watching the man she loved walk away from her, and realized that for all her money and power and family connections, she couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. She'd broken his trust, and trust wasn't something you could buy back with phone calls and legal maneuvers and good intentions. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. Thursday morning, Maya found Naomi sitting on her living room floor, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by legal documents and property records and her laptop. Have you slept at all? Maya asked, setting down coffee and what looked like actual breakfast. I've been thinking. About what? About what Luke said. About me treating him like a charity case. Naomi looked up from her laptop. Was he right? Maya sat down on the couch, choosing her words carefully. You have good intentions. That's not what I asked. Okay, yes, sometimes you do treat people like problems to be solved instead of people to be respected. The truth of that hit harder than Naomi expected. I was trying to help. I know, but help without permission is just control dressed up in prettier clothes. So what am I supposed to do? Just let him lose everything? You're supposed to ask him what he wants. Actually ask him and then listen to the answer, even if it's not the answer you want to hear. Naomi looked down at the documents scattered around her. Purchase agreements, legal briefs, property assessments, all the tools she'd been using to try to fix Luke's life without his consent. What if what he wants is for me to stay out of it? Then you stay out of it. Even if it means watching him lose everything? Maya was quiet for a moment. Naomi, what do you think love is? I don't know. Taking care of people, making their lives better? Maybe sometimes. But mostly, I think love is seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway, not trying to change them or fix them or manage their problems. Just choosing them. As they are. Naomi closed her laptop and leaned back against the couch. I don't know if I know how to do that. Then maybe it's time to learn. But first, Naomi realized she needed to figure out what Luke actually wanted, not what she thought he needed, not what would be best for him, not what would solve all his problems, what he wanted. And there was only one way to find that out. Friday evening, Naomi stood outside Harris Auto Repair for the third time that week. The garage was dark, but Luke's truck was still in the parking lot. She could see light coming from the small house behind the building. This time, she wasn't here to fix anything. She wasn't here to save anyone. She was here to ask a simple question, and whatever the answer was, she would respect it, even if it broke her heart. She knocked on Luke's front door and waited. Footsteps inside, then the door opened. Luke stood there in old jeans and a t-shirt, looking tired and weary. Naomi. Not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. "What are you doing here?" "I came to ask you something." Luke didn't invite her in, but he stepped out onto the small porch and closed the door behind him, protecting his family's space from whatever mess she might bring with her. "What do you want to know?" he asked. Naomi took a deep breath. "I want to know what you want me to do, not what I think would be best, not what would solve your problems. What do you actually want from me?" Luke was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the porch light. That's a new question. It should have been the first question. Yeah, it should have been. They stood there in the evening air, two people who had somehow managed to fall in love despite all the reasons they shouldn't have, two people who had hurt each other without meaning to. "You want an honest answer?" Luke asked. "That's the only kind worth having." Luke sat down on the porch steps, and after a moment, Naomi sat down beside him, not too close, just close enough to show she was listening. "I want you to trust me to handle my own life," he said, quietly. "Even when it gets messy, even when I make mistakes. Okay. I want you to stop trying to fix everything for everyone, including me. Okay. And I want you to be honest with me about your family, your business, your world, all of it. The complicated parts, too." Naomi nodded. "Is that all?" Luke looked at her sideways. "Are you going to ask what else I want?" "Only if you want to tell me." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I want to figure out how to make this work without either of us losing who we are." "Do you think that's possible?" "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." Naomi felt something loosen in her chest, not relief exactly. Hope, maybe, just a small seed of it. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Sure. I talked to my father about the garage, about you. I told him I love you, and I asked him to exclude your property from the development." Luke went very still. "And?" "He said yes. He's already had legal draft a purchase offer for you. Fair market value, no strings attached. You can buy this place if you want to." "If I want to?" "If you want to, you don't have to. You could take the money and start over somewhere else. You could tell me to go to hell and handle the whole thing yourself. Whatever you want to do, I'll support it, without interfering." Luke was quiet for so long that Naomi started to worry she'd said the wrong thing again. Then he spoke. "Why didn't you lead with that? Why didn't you come here Tuesday night and tell me you'd already fixed everything?" "Because Maya helped me realize something. Help without permission is just control dressed up prettier. I should have asked you what you wanted before I did anything. And if I'd said I wanted to handle it myself, then I would have told my father to back off and let you handle it yourself." Luke looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "Really? Really? Luke, I spent so many years having other people make decisions for me that when I finally got some power of my own, I started making decisions for everyone else. It wasn't fair to you." "No, it wasn't." The simple truth of that hung between them. No excuses, no justifications. Just acknowledgement that she had messed up. "I'm sorry," Naomi said, "for not trusting you with the truth about my family. For trying to manage your life without asking. For making you feel like a charity case when all I wanted was to keep you safe." "I'm sorry too," Luke said quietly, "for not believing that someone like you could care about someone like me for the right reasons, for letting my pride get in the way of listening to what you were actually saying." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, letting the apologies settle between them. "So what happens now?" Naomi asked. "Now we figure out how to do this right, starting with that purchase offer your father mentioned." You want to see it? I want us to look at it together, as equals, no one managing anyone else's decisions. Naomi felt that seed of hope grow a little bigger. I'd like that. Luke stood up and offered her his hand. Come on, let's go inside and call your father. I want to thank him for the offer before we start negotiating. Negotiating? Luke grinned, and it was the first completely open smile she'd seen from him in days. You didn't think I was going to accept the first offer, did you? I may be grateful, but I'm not stupid. 2 weeks later, Luke signed the papers that made him the official owner of 1249 Elm Street. The purchase price was fair, the terms were reasonable, and most importantly, Luke had negotiated every detail himself while Naomi sat quietly in the lawyer's office, offering support, but not advice. After the signing, they walked to Ruthie's diner to celebrate. The older woman took one look at them sitting together in their usual booth and broke into a smile that could have powered the whole block. About time you two figured it out, she said, setting down coffee without being asked. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you in the freezer until you came to your senses. We're slow learners, Luke admitted. Speak for yourself, Naomi said, bumping his shoulder playfully. Some of us just needed better teachers. They ordered pie and talked about the future. Luke's plans to expand the garage, maybe hire an apprentice. Naomi's ideas for stepping back from some of her board responsibilities to focus on projects she actually cared about. Small plans, realistic plans, but plans they were making together. I have something for you, Luke said when they were finishing their coffee. He pulled a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Naomi unwrapped it carefully and found a keychain with a single key on it. What's this? Key to the garage in case you ever want to stop by when I'm not there. Naomi turned the key over in her hands. It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. An invitation into his world. A statement of trust. Are you sure? She asked. I'm sure, but I have one condition. What's that? No more paying my bills behind my back. If I need help, I'll ask for it. Deal. But I have a condition too. Luke raised an eyebrow. What's that? No more refusing help just because you're too proud to accept it. If I offer something and you want it, take it. Deal. They shook hands across the table, sealing their new agreement. Partners, not rescuer and rescued. Equals, despite the differences in their bank accounts and backgrounds. So what now? Luke asked. Now we take it one day at a time. No grand gestures, no dramatic rescues. Just us. Just us, Luke agreed. I like the sound of that. 3 months later, Charles Kingsley made his first unofficial visit to Harris Auto Repair, not as the head of a major corporation, but as a man whose daughter was happy for the first time in years. Luke was under the hood of an old pickup truck when Charles arrived, but he came out to greet him immediately, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Mr. Kingsley, what can I do for you? My car's making a strange noise when I brake. Thought you might take a look. It was probably the first time in 30 years that Charles Kingsley had taken his car anywhere other than the dealership. Luke understood the gesture for what it was, an attempt to build a bridge between their very different worlds. I'd be happy to take a look, pull it into the bay. While Luke worked, Charles watched with genuine interest. This was the man his daughter loved, the man who had literally saved her life and was now, in a different way, saving her heart. Brake pads need replacing, Luke said eventually. Nothing serious, but you don't want to wait too long. How much? Luke named a fair price. Not too high, not suspiciously low. The price he would charge anyone. When can you do it? Tuesday morning work for you? Tuesday morning is fine. Charles wrote out a check, then hesitated. Luke, can I ask you something? Sure. What are your intentions toward my daughter? It was the question every father asked, but coming from Charles Kingsley, it carried extra weight. Luke set down his tools and gave the question the serious consideration it deserved. I intend to love her for exactly who she is, he said finally. Not who I think she should be, not who would be convenient for me. Just her. And if that gets complicated, it's already complicated. But some things are worth the complication. Charles nodded slowly. Yes, they are. He held out his hand. Welcome to the family, Luke. They shook hands in the bay of Harris Auto Repair, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of honest work. Two men from completely different worlds, finding common ground in their love for the same woman. 6 months after that first coffee date at Ruthie's diner, Naomi and Luke were back in their corner booth, celebrating Luke's birthday with apple pie and terrible coffee. The diner was busy with the lunch rush, but they barely noticed the noise around them. "So," Naomi said, pushing a small wrapped box across the table. "Happy birthday." Luke opened it carefully and found a watch. Nothing flashy or expensive, just a good solid watch for a working man. The kind that would last for years and tell accurate time no matter how much grease and dirt it encountered. "It's perfect," he said, trying it on. "Thank you." "Look at the back." Luke turned the watch over and found an inscription. "For the man who always shows up. N." "You like it?" "I love it. I love you." The words still sent a little thrill through Naomi every time he said them, not because she needed to hear them, but because she knew he meant them, completely. "I love you too. Even when I'm being stubborn about accepting help. Especially then. Even when I track motor oil through your fancy apartment. I'll buy new carpets." Luke laughed and reached across the table to take her hand. "What do you say we get out of here? Go for a drive? Maybe find some trouble to get into?" "What kind of trouble?" "The good kind. The kind that involves holding hands in terrible pop music and stopping at roadside stands to buy fruit we don't need." "Sounds perfect, but I'm driving." "Are you sure? You remember what happened the last time you drove in questionable weather?" "Hey, that was rain, and it was dark, and—" Luke silenced her with a kiss across the table, quick and sweet and tasting like apple pie. When they broke apart, Ruthie was standing nearby with the coffee pot, grinning at them like they were her own grandchildren. "You two are going to give this old place a reputation," she said. "What kind of reputation?" Naomi asked. "The kind where people come here to fall in love." Luke and Naomi looked at each other and burst out laughing, because it was true in a way. This diner, this booth, these terrible coffee cups, they had become the place where their love story began. Not with drama or grand gestures, but with pie and conversation and the slow, careful work of learning to trust each other. "Could we get the check?" Luke asked. "On the house," Ruthie said firmly. "Consider it my contribution to romance." They left hand in hand, walking out into the afternoon sunshine. Luke's truck was parked next to Naomi's car, a newer model, safer, but not so fancy that it looked out of place next to the pickup. "Your car or mine?" Naomi asked. "Yours, but I'm navigating." "Deal." As they drove through the city toward the open highway, Luke reached over and took Naomi's free hand. The watch she'd given him caught the light as he lifted their joined hands to his lips for a quick kiss. "Thank you," he said. "For the watch? For everything. For stopping by my garage 6 months ago. For trusting me to handle my own life. For showing me what it looks like when someone sees you clearly and chooses you anyway." Naomi glanced over at him, this man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "Thank you for cutting my seatbelt, and for refusing my money, and for teaching me that love isn't about fixing people." "What's it about then?" "It's about showing up, every day, even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated." They drove on through the afternoon, two people from different worlds who had found their way to each other through rain and coffee and the kind of love that didn't need rescuing. Just nurturing. Behind them, the city grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead of them, the road stretched out wide and full of possibilities, and beside them, always, was the person who had chosen them, exactly as they were, rough edges and all. In the end, that was all the happy ending they needed. 2 years later, the grand opening of the Harris Automotive Training Center drew a crowd that included everyone from city council members to neighborhood kids who had been watching the construction with fascination for months. The training center occupied the building next to Luke's original garage, space that had become available when Charles Kingsley's development plans shifted to accommodate one very important auto repair shop. Young people from the community could learn automotive skills, find apprenticeships, and discover that working with their hands was nothing to be ashamed of. "This is amazing," Naomi said, watching Luke demonstrate proper engine maintenance to a group of teenagers. "Look at their faces." "He's a natural teacher," Maya agreed. She was standing with Naomi near the back of the crowd, both of them trying not to beam too obviously at Luke's success. Remember when he told you he wanted to be a teacher before his parents died? He never really stopped being one. He just found a different classroom. Luke caught sight of Naomi across the room and winked at her before returning his attention to his students. 2 years together had taught him to include her in moments like this, to share his joy instead of carrying it alone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles Kingsley's voice carried across the room as he stepped to the microphone, "if I could have your attention for just a moment." The crowd quieted, turning toward Naomi's father. He looked comfortable here, in his good suit, but with his sleeves rolled up from helping to move equipment earlier. "2 years ago, my daughter was in a car accident on a rainy night," Charles began. "A stranger stopped to help her. He didn't know who she was or what she could do for him. He just saw someone who needed help, and he provided it." Luke's face went slightly red as all eyes turned to him. That stranger became a friend. Then, something more. And today, that same man is opening a training center that will give dozens of young people the skills they need to build good lives for themselves. Charles paused, looking around the room. That's what community looks like. That's what happens when good people are given the support they need to do good work. Applause filled the training center, and Naomi felt her throat tighten with pride, not just for Luke, but for her father too. Charles Kingsley had learned something important over the past 2 years, that real success wasn't just about profit margins and quarterly reports. Sometimes it was about using your resources to help good people do good work. After the crowd dispersed, Naomi found Luke in his office, looking tired but happy. The room was small but comfortable, with certificates on the walls and a photo on his desk. The three of them at last year's company picnic, Luke and Naomi and Eli, all of them grinning at the camera. "How does it feel?" she asked, perching on the edge of his desk. "Overwhelming, amazing, terrifying." Luke pulled her down into his lap. "All of the above. Any regrets?" "About what?" "About not taking the easy way out 2 years ago. About staying and fighting for what you wanted instead of just walking away." Luke considered the question seriously, the way he always did. "Do you have any regrets? About choosing the complicated guy over someone who would have been easier to explain at dinner parties?" "Are you kidding? Those dinner parties are way more interesting now. Last month, Mrs. Patterson spent 20 minutes asking me about carburetor repair. Did you know the answers? I'm learning. I have a very good teacher." Luke laughed and kissed her forehead. "No regrets, Naomi, not about any of it. Not even about the time I paid your electric bill behind your back? Especially not about that. That's when I knew you were serious about wanting to take care of me. And that's when I learned the difference between taking care of someone and managing their life. Took you long enough? Hey, I'm a work in progress. We both are, but we're making progress together." Through the office window, they could see the last of the visitors leaving the training center. Tomorrow, Luke would start teaching his first official class. Next month, Naomi would cut the ribbon on a new scholarship program for students who couldn't afford the training fees. Small steps, but meaningful ones. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Naomi said. "What's that?" "That night you pulled me out of my car. You said the world was a better place with me in it." "I remember." "Well, I think you were wrong." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Wrong how?" "The world isn't better because I'm in it. It's better because we're in it together." Luke was quiet for a moment, holding her close in the small office that smelled like coffee and new beginnings. Outside, the sun was setting over the neighborhood they had both come to call home. A neighborhood where a Kingsley and a mechanic could build something beautiful together, one honest day at a time. "Yeah," Luke said finally, his voice soft with contentment. "I think you're right." And in that small office, in that moment of perfect ordinary happiness, Naomi Kingsley and Luke Harris knew with absolute certainty that they had found exactly what they'd been looking for all along. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale. Just a love story built on truth, trust, and the radical decision to show up for each other every single day. It was more than enough. It was everything.